Cade. Thanks for joining me again today as we dive into another great conversation.
Yeah, happy to do it.
Well, today we will be discussing the process of making decisions, and this is part of that framework. So obviously you're aware of this, but a framework that we follow at Intentional Living, our financial planning company, is this framework of values, goals, decisions, and actions. And we try to address things through that lens of first establishing values, what is thematically important. And then from there, allowing that to then inform goals. Once we've understood goals, then we can navigate the decisions that are probably going to arise and hopefully preemptively understand how we will respond to those decisions when they do come up. And then lastly, if we've done a good job of those first three, establishing, like clarifying our values, establishing goals, understanding the decisions and the trade-offs and opportunity cost, then we can take action with conviction and clarity, and we can be more resourceful with that, efficient and effective with our actions. So today's conversation, we'll be focusing in on the decision process. So you're in for a good one. Well, let's start off with, and I will note that I've spent a good amount of time doing some research on this over the last few years. So it's the last 8 or 9 years, reading and listening and studying up on the actual study of decision making. And the last few days I've refreshed myself on some of these resources. So I'll be referencing some books. So there's a book called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, Decisive by Dan and Chip Heath, How to Decide by Annie Duke, Nudge by Richard Thaler, and a handful of other just studies that I've come across. So this will be a lot of other people's work that I'm bringing in to help me understand how we make decisions as well. Let's start off with talking through decisions themselves. Like, how do we tend to decide and address options? Here's an interesting statistic I came across. This is an Ernst & Young study into 2025. It said that 90% of businesses fail in the first 5 years. Okay, now consider that
Yeah, I've heard that.
their equivalent finding is, so 90% of businesses fail in the first 5 years. But they also found that 95% of entrepreneurs believe that they will succeed. So obviously there's some sort of disconnect there between how we're viewing outcomes and obviously how we make decisions. If you believe that you will fail and you fall into that 90% of a failure rate, you would probably make a decision to not go ahead and try things. I thought it was interesting. Do you have any thoughts there, Cade?
Yeah, I've heard that 90% of businesses fail in the first 5 years. I've not heard the specific stat about 95% think they will succeed, but it makes sense. Like most entrepreneurs, I feel like a lot of people have ideas, but they are too afraid to pursue them. So even if it's a great idea, they fear failing, and probably because they've read about the 90% of businesses fail. But entrepreneurs, like a big a big a big part of that is just being willing to take a chance and try something. And so you have to have confidence in your ability to succeed. But I would assume it has something. There's just maybe a lack of planning. Like, yeah, I have this idea. I'm very confident that I can succeed. And maybe, you and I talk about this a lot. I feel like people have a tendency to just jump straight to action versus really spending a lot of time planning through how they're going to arrive at the actions they're actually going to take. I would guess that there's a breakdown somewhere in there.
Yeah, I don't want to make it sound like arrogance is necessary. Obviously, I don't like arrogance. But if you're going to start a business, that means that you probably assume that there's something that you can do better than someone else can do, at least in your area or to the people you're going to serve. So it
Mhm.
almost, in a sense, requires some degree of arrogance, or I don't know, high view of self. So
Mhm.
that would go hand in hand with, yes, despite having a 90% chance of failing, statistically, 95% of people think they're going to be successful, that probably has some part to play in their view of self. And it's important to have a high,
Mhm.
not an overly high view of self, but you need to have confidence. If you start a business think you're going to fail, we'll talk about this in a bit, like how do you assess failure and everything. You probably want to start off with confidence. Now, it's assuming you have reasonable and founded confidence. I think some of those statistics as far as business failures are sort of skewed by goofy businesses that never should have started. It's like, hey, we make shoes for goats. It's like, dude, that you are directly contributing to that stat. Like you're drawing the 90% stat up, man, and no one told him. So that guy is part of the 95% that he thinks is going to win, but yet he is directly contributing to the 90% failure rate. Watch, I'm going to find there's some like wildly successful goat shoe company out there that just totally made me eat my words. But you get the point. That's
Surely. Yeah.
I think that's part of it is understanding, having good insight to the decisions you're making. And there's a book in the Bible. It's a book of Proverbs, and there's one of the like little proverbs in there. It talks about having a multitude of wise counsel. So maybe if in my head shoes for goats is a good idea, maybe I should go to a multitude of counsel and get their thoughts before I need to check my hubris before I just run with this thing. Just a thought.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here's
I think
okay. Here's
that's
another interesting one with decision making, is temptation and also mindlessness. So I was thinking about this last night. I was laying in bed. I was thinking about how we sometimes mindlessly make decisions, and that oftentimes comes up with points of temptation. And where my head went with this was, I'm sure you've done this, or at least I have. You ever sit down with a group of friends and there's maybe a bowl of chips or a bag of chips in front of you, and you just keep eating them, and you're not even really hungry. Maybe you're ruining your dinner you're supposed to have in a bit, and you just eat chips over and over. Then finally someone comes and they take the chips away, and you turn to them and say, thank you for taking that away.
Yep.
Logically, that makes no sense because you had the ability to make a decision of, am I going to eat a couple of chips? Am I not going to eat any chips? Or am I just going to eat them all? But we are mindless oftentimes, especially when a tasty temptation is in front of us. Thus, we have removed our intentionality with making a decision. We have removed ourselves from there, and we move to the default. And that default, if it's something that's tempting, is to go ahead and participate or partake in that.
Interesting. Yeah. I can definitely relate to that. We actually last night, um, Bethany and I were watching a show, and I had chips and guac. I saw that I wasn't even hungry, just like you said. I went to the fridge to get a drink. I was going to sit and just drink some water and watch the show, and saw the guac sitting there. And I was like, oh man, that looks really good. And yeah, I sat there and snacked on chips and guac. And after I had already eaten dinner, I wasn't hungry at all. It's just there it was.
Yeah, and if Bethany had came and taken them away, you would probably have said, "Hey, thank you." I would have eaten that whole
Yep.
thing. But you would have made the
Yep.
decision to eat the whole thing. You could still make the decision. At that point, you could still make the decision. You're an adult. You could decide to stand up and
Hmm.
grab the chips out of her hand and continue eating. But it is the
Hmm.
mindlessness of default. And we'll go into that deeper. I think it's really interesting. And a point that came out probably in one of those books, I'd like to think that it was my own thought, but it's probably not, was sometimes the hardest part of making a good decision is realizing that there's a decision to be made. So is that stopping and assessing? And that's something I've realized in the last decade or so of working with people regarding their money is most people skip the values and goals. And frankly, they're not really even making decisions, or at least they don't think they are. They're just taking action, not recognizing that
Hmm.
with everything you do, there is a decision that is made, be it by following the status quo or making a decision in your split second. You are deciding something. You are anytime you choose something, you are choosing to give up something else. There's opportunity cost with everything you do. And yeah, recognizing that you actually have the ability to make a decision, there is a decision to be made in that moment is, I would say, is pretty high on the priority list. Otherwise, you'll feel like that you are a victim of circumstances versus the culmination of decisions that you have made and your ability to continue making decisions.
Yeah, I think it probably just snowballs, right? Because it would sound goofy to if you're at a party like you mentioned and you're snacking on chips. It's goofy to think that I need to pause and evaluate the opportunity cost of continuing to eat these chips. but those are really small decisions that you are like subconsciously making. And I think that just leads into bigger and bigger decisions. You mirroring those same habits or that same lack of pausing.
Yeah, I mean, if you were, let's say you're going out to your favorite dinner, like my favorite meal is I like an old fashioned with maybe some sort of appetizer, maybe like a cheese and prosciutto, something like that, and then a a medium rare fillet with mac and cheese and some sort of green, followed by some sort of like chocolate dessert. And while I'm having my steak and everything, a glass of red wine, maybe a Brunello, something like that. So if I have that, my evening date night with Kendra is leading up to this meal, and someone offers me some chips, if I pause and think, wait, no, I have my favorite meal tonight and I won't be able to finish that. I won't be able to enjoy that meal as much because I ate these chips. I'm not going to have these chips. So it's a matter of stopping and thinking through, okay, if I take this chip, what are the implications later on? And that's easier. Maybe if, oh, this is interesting. If we're sitting at a table, that table, it's dinner that night, and I have my steak, my mac and cheese, all that stuff in front of me, and I had the bowl of chips on my left and everything else is in front of me, I'm not going to touch those chips. But if it's an hour before, even if I know that those chips will impact my meal, but I'm not considering it, I'll probably grab a few chips at least. So it's this
Yeah.
framing of how will this decision impact other things, my ability to do other things later on, and pausing and reflecting on that.
Yep. It makes
Hey,
sense. I just think that people don't do it because that happens oftentimes with very simple decisions that you think this isn't worth considering the opportunity cost, and then that just leads into you make those you make that same choice with other decisions. It's probably, I don't know. I'm not the expert on that, but
we're about to talk through some often like common pitfalls and problems with decision making, but I want to maybe bring up one last point before we go there. So Cade, I will offer you the opportunity to take a bet. You can take this bet if you'd like. You don't have to if you don't want to, but I will flip a coin, and if it's heads, you win X amount of dollars. You can decide. Okay, but if it's tails, you lose $100. Okay. How much money do you need to win in order for you to take that bet? So
oh my
tails,
gosh.
you lose
You
$100. How much do
okay?
you need
And
to take that
heads
bet?
what? What happens on heads again?
Heads, heads, you win. But how much money do
Okay.
you need to take heads for you to take that bet?
I'm by no means a betting person, so this might be a simple answer, but it's going over my head. I have no idea. I'll say $100.
So you would do it for so tails, you lose $100. You would take that bet right now.
Sure.
Okay. Well, maybe you're a savant. Most people in that situation, from what I've learned, most people tend to overweight losing by twice as much as the opportunity of winning. So the average response
Hmm.
to that question is, I would need X to be $200 because that thought of losing that $100 is more painful than the thought of winning $100. So they have to double up.
Yeah.
It's roughly two times as painful to lose as it is to gain. So again, that's just
Yeah.
you're a bad example. I guess you're too smart for me. But that is another example of a mental framework issue that most people have when it comes to decision making. Let's talk
Yeah.
through. So this might be a little dull, but we can go over some of these like common problems when it comes to making decisions. So a big one, and this is something we run into all the time, is what's called they call narrow framing. So it's asking a question the sense of a this or that versus opening it up to more creative options. And I observe this in
Mhm.
what we do all daily. So you and I obviously we work with people in financial planning. So we have people come to us regularly and say, "Hey, Jim, Cade, team, we are considering doing X. We're considering buying this business or selling our business or buying this real estate property. Do we buy the real estate or not?" And generally, what I've observed is when they ask that question, they're asking that question with probably three other points of consideration in their mind. They're
Mhm.
considering if they want to buy, let's say they want to buy a rental property. They're considering how much will it cost, what will be the cash flow, and should they put it into an LLC or not? That's probably as far as they're going. Versus, well, how much will you put down? And what's the opportunity cost of putting that money down towards something else? What will be your monthly mortgage payment? And what would be the opportunity cost of that mortgage? What are the tax implications? So a lot of our job is helping people take people from this narrow framing. Do I do this in this vacuum way of seeing things and saying, well, when you see this decision, you see it in light of these factors, but here is everything else that needs to go into making this decision. And where I regularly go back to in this scenario is a large part of our job is like helping people work puzzles. The first part of a puzzle is you get if you're working a puzzle, you're going to dump out all the pieces. You're going to, at least I do, I set the box up where I can see it and reference it throughout my puzzle building. So you want to take a good look of what is the thing that we are trying to build towards. You get all the pieces laid out. You don't want to start with just a few pieces. There's not enough to work with. You want all the pieces on the table. You get them all face up. Then you start sorting them out. Then you can start building and designing from there until you build this picture. And a lot of our job is people come to us and they think that, hey, I'm making this decision. Here's 4 puzzle pieces. And a lot of our job is to say, well, here's 30 other puzzle pieces that are going to impact this puzzle, as this picture you're building as well. Oh, and hey, if the IRS makes the change and they throw in 9 new pieces, how will that impact things? So yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. I would say that's probably one of the biggest culprits here is narrow framing, or at least what I see is this lack of, or I guess our lack of ability to view things in a bigger way. And that can stifle our ability to be able to be more creative, consider alternative options.
Yeah, again, I think that just comes down to a lot of people's tendency to uh, be reactive and make a decision and not taking the time to fully evaluate everything that decision is going to impact. I think just having that realization is all it takes, and then obviously the expertise to connect the dots and understand everything and that decision actually will impact.
Yeah. This is a bias that you hear about a lot, or at least I do, is confirmation bias. I feel like that's sort of an in vogue thing to talk about now. Maybe it is in a nerdy area, I don't know. But confirmation bias is basically the tendency to look for information that validates what you already believe.
Mm-hmm.
So what it comes down to is we tend to seek reassurance about what we already believe versus tending to seek truth. So we need to make sure that when we're looking for things, we're not seeking just validation and what we hope to find, but rather we're seeking truth and goodness out of this. So not succumbing to confirmation bias. And the flip side to confirmation bias is called disconfirmation bias. So disconfirmation bias is our tendency to have a higher standard of critique for data that disproves what we already believe. So if you think that, I don't know, that investing in individual stocks is really bad, maybe that's right or wrong. But a disconfirmation bias you would look for reports and studies that show uh, suboptimal performance returns, and you're going to use that to build your case without looking at the total picture here. So again, confirmation bias. Then also, if you're trying to quote unquote do your due diligence, are you really, or are you just trying to build a straw man?
Yeah.
Uh, what else we got? Other common problems: overconfidence bias. So it's easy for us to have overconfidence about what we've overlooked or don't know. I see this a ton. I feel like people look at us sometimes in a way that sort of you would not expect your financial planners to admit, because I regularly tell our clients I don't know. People come to us, hey Jim, should I buy this stock? What will the stock market look like in a year? What will this real estate piece look like in a couple of years? I could pretend that I'm outrageously smart and have a crystal ball, or I could be honest and say, I don't know. Recognizing that the factors that I'm considering are probably more broad than the factors that they were considering on their own. Of course, I don't know any more than they do, but at least the considerations that I'll bring up are probably more than the considerations they're bringing up. Going back to what we discussed earlier with broadening your options versus limiting them. But yeah, make sure you don't succumb to overconfidence bias, where you pretend that you know everything and then to get stuck in this vacuum of confirmation bias of, well, you already know, so therefore why should you be looking for more information and more data points?
Yeah, I think you have to approach a decision recognizing that you might not have all of the information necessary to make that decision, or that the information you have could be wrong. So you have to be open minded enough to go out and gather that extra information that you need to make a decision.
Here's one that I see Kendra, my wife, do a lot. Sorry, babe, is availability bias and recency bias. So those, they're I'm gonna lump them together because they're pretty similar. I get like a real scientist would say they're not, but I'm a pseudoscientist. So availability and recency bias, essentially it's overweighting easily recalled or vivid events, and also believing that recent events are more likely to occur than they actually are. So for instance, if so after 9/11, people were worried about terrorist
Mhm.
attacks at a heightened rate. Or if you witness or if you hear about a plane crash regularly on the news, you're going to think that flying is dangerous, but driving the car is fine. I have to remind where Kendra thinks about this often is, oh, I'm worried about the kids in XYZ. And I have to remind her statistically, it's more likely that we get in a car wreck driving to that thing than it is for something to go bad at that thing. Let's say we're going to a
Yeah,
barbecue at the park and Kendra's concerned that someone's going to come up with a gun and shoot everybody or something like that. That's terrible. She considers that without considering what if on the way to the park we're sideswiped and get this terrible car wreck. Statistically, that happens way
hmm
more often than someone showing up to the barbecue and shooting people. But it's this availability and sort of recency bias that we can succumb to pretty easily.
yeah. I've heard the plane crash versus car crash scenario before, but I could be making this up. But I think that's also lumped in sometimes to some kind of a control bias of like, I have no control. I'm not the one piloting this plane, so I view that as more risky than I'm behind the wheel. I'm controlling my destiny here.
Yeah, dude, that's actually so another bias is our illusion of control. We tend to
Mm,
overweight our
yep.
ability to control a situation and not
Yep.
accrediting on the good side and the bad side, accrediting outside factors. We call it luck
hmm
or other people's actions to our success or failures.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking of.
We'll touch on some other fallacies in a bit. I won't just browbeat though. So let's we'll come back to these and actually how do we recognize these issues and how do we try to avoid succumbing to them? There's a couple funny things you come across. So I don't know. Have you ever heard about the gorilla suit experiment?
I don't think so. Just based
Okay.
off of that, no.
Okay. Yeah, that didn't come to mind. So there's a pretty famous psychology study done. I think it was at a university like in the 70s, probably making it up. Again, like I think 76% of statistics are made up on the spot. So just keep that in mind.
Mm.
Uh, so there's a study that was done. They had a group of people say, "Hey, focus on anytime you see a square go past the screen,
Uh,
you click a button or something like that." They had them super
yes.
focused on a particular thing. And like, let's say a study was 90 seconds long. At like the 20-second mark, someone walks across the camera right in front of you with a gorilla suit and starts like dancing around and then walks off. And
Yes.
almost no participants in this study noticed the gorilla suit person because they were so focused, they had their attention so focused on a particular thing that they were blind to what was obviously in front of them. So
hmm
that's another problem we can have is this I don't know, becoming myopic to what we're
hmm
trying to see and then forgetting to zoom out and recognizing everything around us. The other implications, you're told, hey, focus on this thing. So you're going to, your brain is only going to register so much versus being able to step back and see everything else going on that could impact. Like, the gorilla did not impact a square coming on the screen. But if this is real life and you're looking for squares and a gorilla runs in front of you, that thing's going to tear your arms off. Like you need to be aware of your
Yeah.
surroundings and the implications of other circumstances arising.
Yeah, I have seen, or at least a similar one. I think the one that I saw was a group of people tossing a ball, and you had to count how many times the
That's it.
ball was
Yeah,
tossed
yeah.
between. And then, yeah, the gorilla goes across, and then you watch the video and it's like, did you see the gorilla, the dancing gorilla? And I'm like, there's no way there was a dancing gorilla in this video. And if sure enough, you rewind it and it was there the whole time.
Yeah, it's
That
like,
is
wait a second,
crazy.
is that the same video I just watched?
Yeah. That's it's funny.
I know I mentioned this earlier, is like our fear of loss. There's again, studies show that generally speaking, we tend to fear loss about twice as much as we enjoy gains.
Mhm.
And then typically we tend to gamble in order to avoid pain. So, for instance, an example of loss aversion I came across is you're if you're given the option for a sure gain of $500 or a 50% chance at $1,000, which one do you think you would take? I can give you 500 bucks right now, or you can have a 50% chance of getting 1,000 or a 50% chance of zero. Which one do you take?
Yeah, I tend to give me the 500 that I don't already have. Give me the
Okay.
sure win.
Okay. Now, Cade, I'm going to by force take $500 from you, or I'll toss this coin. You have a 50-50 chance of losing 1,000 or keeping your money. Which one do you take? Do you give me the 500
Is-
or do you flip the
Do I give
coin?
you the five? Is it the 500 that you just gave me,
No, starting
or is it my
fresh.
own 500? Okay, so you will either take 500 bucks from me that I've not won from you, or you'll coin toss and I can 50-50 that I'll lose 1,000.
Yeah. But yeah,
Okay.
which one are you taking?
My 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 genuine thought here, and it might break the scenario, but I would no, I'm thinking through this in real time. Never thought about this before. If I know I'm gonna lose, yeah, I guess I would take the chance on not losing 1,000.
You succumbed. See, you
Yeah,
you you outsmarted the first one, but not this time.
yeah.
That's
I started to say I'll just lose 500 because that's better than losing 1,000. But I was like, no, actually, and I know that was the answer that breaks it, but I think I probably would take my chances and not risk losing anything.
yeah, that's our tendency. We like to have a sure win, but we tend to gamble if we're trying to
Hmm.
avoid a loss.
Yeah,
Really interesting. I don't know what you can do with that
yeah, it
fact,
is.
but just put that in your back pocket and remember, just recognizing, knowing these things, recognize like, why did I make that decision? What's causing that? I think it's really
Hmm.
important. Okay, other issues that we can come across. There's other or planning fallacies. So uh, there is. Ooh, I see this all the time. So this is a planning fallacy, and what that is, it's the plans and forecast are generally unrealistically close to the best case scenario while ignoring statistical norms. So, for instance, where I see
Hmm.
this constantly, two places I see this all the time is spending habits. When we ask someone, hey, roughly how much do you spend on a monthly, annual basis? People, I
Hmm.
don't know if this falls directly into planning policy, but we'll talk about it anyways. People undershoot how much they spend by about 35% almost every time. Like if someone tells me
Hmm.
how much they think they spend, I can, with pretty high degree of confidence, take that, add 35%, and that's actually what they're spending. Now, where I see this on an actual planning scale come in is with people who are doing home remodels or home builds. This is we forecast how long it'll take us because we're looking at best case scenario while ignoring statistical norms. And again, that
Hmm.
those numbers come up to, well, you know, we think we could get it done in the next 3 months at $100,000. But in reality, what I've seen time after time is you need to budget in about 30% more build time and 30% more cost than what you're expecting. Because you're expecting for the best,
Hmm.
not looking at statistical norms.
Yeah, yeah. That actually came up yesterday or the day before. Somebody was asking us about house flipping, and I was looking into some of the statistics there, and it is most. I think most of those projects fail when someone overestimates how much they think they're going to be able to sell the house for after they've done the remodel, and they underestimate how much it's going to cost to make the fixes, and underestimate how long it's going to take to potentially sell the house. So that's a real world example that I guess just came up a couple days ago.
We tend to trust our story and our circumstance more than we trust statistics, and
Hmm.
goodness, what's the word I'm looking for, Cade? Where it's like one scenario, oh, that's just an anecdote. Maybe
Hmm.
I'm wrong here, but aren't statistics just a whole bunch of anecdotes put together? Maybe not.
Yeah.
Maybe right now I'm an absolute idiot. But I would think
Yeah.
that's how the statistics are like 1,000 anecdotes.
Yeah.
So anecdotally, we look at ourselves and we tend to favor that. Oh, well, I'm a best case scenario because X, Y, Z. But I'm pretty sure going back to those other people, the 90% business failures, but the 95% chances like of thought of success, like
Hmm.
these are anecdotes in themselves without zooming out, looking at statistic probabilities. And again, it's good to have a positive outlook. I started a business and I was pretty high confident it would work out, but considering, there's that classic saying like what hope for or plan for the worst, hope for the best.
Yeah.
I don't know. Okay, so
Yeah. You've done more, I would say, research and reading on this than most people. So like you went into it thinking through all of these things and having a clear plan and thinking about, all of the opportunity costs and the impacts, and if this happens, how do I need to be prepared? So you were very well thought out in how you approached it.
it's
I
true.
think
I
most
already
people
did. So
don't
like
do that.
these tools that we're about to talk through in a second, I already had these in my back pocket whenever I made the decision to start
Hmm.
this business. I had the preparation ready to go. Right quick, a few places on, okay, if we're looking at the planning fallacy, okay, the planning fallacy again is our tendency to trust our story and our circumstance more than we trust statistical norms. So a good normal example that I run into constantly is a house remodel or a house build taking 30 to 40% more time than they expected and costing 30 to 40% more than they expected it to. That happens like constantly. I tell our clients, hey, you should
Hmm.
probably be aware it's going to take this much more time and money. So, how do we
Hmm.
help navigate that? So, there's an order of doing this. One, you want to start off with identifying the reference point. So, the reference point being that statistical norm. Okay. So, don't allow your best case scenario to be the anchor, allow the norm to be the anchor. Like, all right, on average, a house remodel of this type takes 9 months. Okay. So, all right, that will be the reference point. And then you take your plan and adjust from there. It's like, oh, well, my contractor's the best, and my wife and I are super decisive, and we have the unlimited budget to make it happen. So, I think we know it's going to happen in 6 months. So, again, the planning fallacy would say it's going to happen in 6 months. When the way to address it is to say 9 months is average, that's our base case. And then you use your plan, your circumstance to adjust from there. So you think it's going to take less time, start at 9 and inch closer to the 6. So you can go down from there. And
Hmm.
then the last piece to this, and we do this all the time, is running what's called a pre-mortem. And a pre-mortem, we'll probably bring that up again later on. But a pre-mortem is essentially deliberately imagining a failure or worst case scenario. And the what that does, that uncovers hidden risks and helps you improve decisions. So it's like, all right, we're going to remodel our house. Gosh, I think it's going to take us 6 months. Well, it takes the average person 9 months. I think we'll go faster. So instead of 9, I'll bump that down to probably 8 months as well to take our family. Okay, well, I would like it to happen in 6. Why would it not happen in 6 months? Why would it even not happen in 9? Oh, well, if we got to do new roof. What if it rained for months on end, just constantly, so you couldn't get the work done? What if they found out their
Hmm.
electrical issues they weren't ready to address, or it turns out the foundation was off? So you start taking these scenarios, this premortem, and bring that in, so you can start thinking, all right, why would this fail? Why would this not happen successfully? Why would it not happen in the time frame I want it to? Why would this not happen in the budget? Or even like, hey, what would need to happen what would happen for me to totally abandon this idea? So we go break ground on the house remodel and we realize the foundation is off by 3 feet. At that point, are you going to continue? Or are you going to say, all right, this is too bad. I'm not going to try to put a guest bedroom on this. We're just going to abandon ship and probably move houses. So it's assessing what going forward in time, saying, all right, what will happen in order to me for this to go bad, or even for me to change our plan.
Yeah, it's important. I think just going through that exercise will force you to think beyond the best case scenario that you might have outlined in your head that you're making this decision off of. So that's super valuable.
Another way, another issue that people run into, it's called substitution heuristics. So substitution heuristics is it's essentially it's a lazy way of answering the question that's posed by not actually answering the question that was given to you, but substituting it with another question and answering that new question. So, Cade, what I'm trying to think of a big question. I don't know. What would be an ideal summer? And then you come in like, oh, I would, or, yeah, oh, I would like to do this. I can't think of one on the top of my head. I'm sorry, but
Or like you asked me what would be an ideal summer, and that's a big question. So I just immediately respond with, "Well, I really like to play golf."
yes.
Like,
So you instead of answering what's an ideal summer, you're answering what's an activity that I enjoy. The
yeah,
problem with that, well, the quote unquote good thing is it's fast and you're confident about your answer. The problem is
hmm
you're often wrong. Oh, hey, what would you like to do when you retire? I like to golf. Okay. So you think you're going to golf forever. You're probably wrong. You are substituting the question that I asked with another question that you can answer quickly. But the conclusion you're coming to is, well, I'm going to retire. Then I guess I'll just golf a bunch because I enjoy golf. I didn't ask you what's something a thing that you enjoy doing occasionally, but rather why do you want
hmm
to retire? You're answering the wrong question. You're substituting a different question
yeah,
in. And I mean, we see this all the time with again that can get intertwined with going back to those like recency bias and things like that. It's like, oh, is plane travel dangerous? Oh yeah, super dangerous. There was a plane crash yesterday. It's like, oh,
hmm
you're answering was there a recent crash, not is this dangerous? Again,
yeah.
our brains are looking for these mental shortcuts, and that's what the book Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, it talks about these two parts of our brain, the fast brain and slow brain, and it's pretty interesting stuff. But our brains desire to find these little mental shortcuts, and there's nothing wrong with those per se, as long as you recognize when they're being used and how to use them, and what times you use these shortcuts versus you shouldn't. You need to stop and pause and actually like, okay, let's take a moment and really noodle on this versus shoot from the hip. Okay, let's start talking through what is how do we make better decisions. Let's pair this in with I think we could pair this in with crossing that bridge of like just beating up on decision making and start giving some hope. So one thing that's often found is that we have issues with making choices, or there's choice issues often come up when choices and consequences are separated by large gaps of time. And the larger the gap, generally the larger the disparity in the quality of our choice. So I don't know. The world's right now it's the World Series, and a few nights ago, the
Mhm.
World Series went to 18 innings. It was 1 or 2 a.m. in Central Time. So a decision that could arise then is, hey, I'm going to stay up late, watch the World Series. I'm having a good time. The next morning, you're groggy. You don't want to get out of bed. We made
Mhm.
this decision without considering the impact it'll have in the morning. In the morning, you're like, oh, why did I stay up so late? Or maybe it's worth it. But if you were that tired at that moment, would you have made that decision? Now you compound that on your personal self and the decisions you make for 40 years out when it comes to retirement planning. Like, oh, well, I want to do XYZ. Well, I want to live my life now. Okay, well, that future you is still you. Let's make decisions
Mhm.
in light of the long-term context rather than just being myopic to today.
Yeah, and that makes sense. The more time there is, obviously, the bigger the impact that will be. Like your example of watching the World Series, you don't think about how you're going to feel that next morning, much less because you started work the next day and you were exhausted. you weren't super productive, and that just snowballs. And by the time the end of the week rolls around, that one decision of staying up late, now you're so far behind this week because of that one single decision. And if you're not careful, that can snowball into next week. And yeah, you amplify that by a larger decision that impacts retirement 40 years from now, and uh, that can be pretty drastic.
Yeah, and it's again taking into consideration. Well, this is, let's say you and your a close friend or your spouse or kids stayed up and watched that, and you made a memory. It's like, hey, you know what? I was tired the next day, but in 30 years, I'll look back and man, we watched the World Series walk off home run, bottom the 18th inning, and it was awesome. You're not going to remember like, oh, and
Mhm.
yeah, I was groggy at lunch at work the next day, and I had to sleep in my car during my lunch break or something. Like, so consider what
Yeah.
are the impacts. There are opportunity cost. Is the opportunity cost worth the decision you made? Just that's all we're saying
Mhm.
is take these considerations as you make decisions. I guess what this comes down to is, well, one, when you make decisions, you are using you have to you're giving your attention to something, or you're not. Maybe you make a decision by taking the status quo. Okay. So your decision is I will do the default. Or you can stop and intentionally make a decision. The problem is attention itself is a scarce and costly resource. So like you have a limited budget of attention to give. Okay. And again,
Mhm.
like the book Thinking Fast and Slow, it parcels out to a system one and system two. So system one is automatic and intuitive. So it uses way less energy. And system two is logical and deliberate. So it uses a lot more energy. And another problem is decision energy. So the that scarce resource that we use to make decisions, we'll call it decision energy. It has a limited amount of fuel, and that fuel is really costly. Maybe it's eaten up more quickly when you're tired or the task is unpleasant. Okay. That's why, maybe it can be more dangerous. The classic is it can be more dangerous to go to the grocery store when you're hungry because you have limited energy. So you are making less logical and deliberate purchasing decisions in that moment. Or maybe you're doing a task that you actually absolutely despise. You're filing your taxes, or for me, it's doing like around the house chores. Those decisions drain me mentally, are draining. So they're especially costly when when you're tired or the task itself is unpleasant for you.
Yeah, and that's you will be less thoughtful and more apt to just jumping straight to some kind of an action and not really thinking through the implications because you don't want to spend your limited energy on this terrible task. It makes
Yeah.
sense.
Well, even like self control and and deliberate thinking draw from the same resource. So there's a lot of studies that show like if you um if you are doing a simple task and you're given like carrots or chocolate, you're probably going to take the carrots. But if you do a task that's really mind numbing exercise and you're exhausted afterwards, you're going to be more prone to take the chocolate because you have depleted that willpower because your self control and that deliberate thinking are drawing from the same pool of energy. So just again, I'm not saying don't eat chocolate. I'm just considering why are you in this circumstance to make the decision you are. That's where even like heck, even priming can come in. So priming is like the order of which you make decisions can impact what decision you make. Okay, so you could be primed to make a good decision or primed to make a bad decision based off the circumstance that led to the circumstance you're in now. Thus, giving you a better opportunity, a worse opportunity to make a decision. How often maybe you get frustrated in traffic, and you honk at the guy, and for me, if I'm frustrated in traffic, it's probably because like I'm like listening to a book on like 3x speed while trying to drive, and maybe like the kids just annoyed me. And I left the house. The kids were hollering at me. And I get on the road. I'm like, "Ah," and then someone cuts me off in a honk. Versus if like I'm just in a chill mood and someone cuts me off, it's like, hey, you know what? There's probably something going on. Like I'm not mad. So it wasn't that itself. I was primed by other factors that led to this to then make a bad decision.
Yeah. The in that example, the guy that cuts you off when you're in a chill mode is probably the guy that just left his house because his kids were screaming at him and he's trying to listen to an audiobook on 3x.
Yep. Yeah, he was probably me in that situation.
Exactly.
Let's talk through. So when you make a decision, it can be tough to make good decisions. Again, going back to making bad decisions is easier if we don't recognize the impact of said decision for a long time. Okay. Now, with that said, a means of making better decisions could be to try to get quicker feedback to to get quicker feedback to the decisions you're making. So, for instance, you're at the ice cream shop, okay, and they have 10 types of ice cream, and you want to know which ice cream do I actually want to get a scoop of. Well, you can just try a bunch. Okay, it's like, hey, give me the strawberry. You get a small scoop or you get a spoon. You taste it. You know right then, do I like that? Do I want to get a whole scoop on that and eat that for the next 15 minutes? You have instant, clear, and immediate feedback. So if we can try to get feedback more quickly on our decisions, even if that's small pieces of feedback, I think that'd be really helpful. And that's where, again, seeking counsel from other people, looking at other studies, dipping your toe into things, learning about yourself and learning about other opportunities allows for feedback, both on how you respond to things and what's available out there. Another thing that can be impactful for decision making is we talked about earlier is running a pre-mortem. So again, a pre-mortem is essentially you are asking, hey, what would cause this to fail, or for me to need to change directions on this. Essentially, it's a way of uncovering blind spots. Like, okay, I think it's going to work out. Well, why wouldn't it work out? Let's go 1 year in the future. You started this business for goat shoes, and hey, it actually turns out that your goat shoe store is you had to close the doors. Why is that? Well, I guess I couldn't find enough people to buy the goat shoes. Okay, why couldn't you find them? Because my marketing failed. Okay, why did your marketing fail? And you start pulling on those and you recognize, well, what are the issues? So, thus, what are some issues I need to start addressing preemptively? So, it's addressing your blind spots that probably there's a good chance these blind spots exist already, and you can preemptively address them.
Yeah, again, it just forces you to think through, have more deeper thought and planning around whatever this endeavor is, whether it's selling goat shoes or something different. But yeah, it just forces you to pause and think, okay, I'm probably assuming the best case scenario here. If this fails, why would that be? And then yeah, like you said, now you've gotten a head start on, I guess, getting ahead of something happening ahead of time.
Yeah. All right. So, what are things that we can do to make better decisions? And again, I guess we'll sort of continue going down like, okay, what are things that led to like some of these can go both ways. So, for instance, status quo bias. We have this goes back to the chips. If you have chips in front of you, you most likely will fall into inertia of eating chips. Status quo is, well, there's food in front of me and I like that food, therefore I'll eat it. That default is eating the chip. Well, you can also turn this bias, the status quo bias, into something good. If you're just going to do status quo, again, you're making a decision. For instance,
Mm-hmm.
auto enrollment in your 401k. So a lot of 401k plans, they found that people weren't contributing to it at a high enough rate or even participating in it at all. So a lot of 401k plans a while back started doing auto enrollment at 3%. And participation jumped to the roof because people were defaulted to enroll at X%. And if you wanted to opt out, you would go through and say, I don't want to participate versus the default being zero and having to, overcome the inertia of zero and go in and make a decision to do something. So if we could orient ourselves to where even if I quote unquote don't make a decision, our decision is passivity, where that decision itself is optimizing. And that's where automated savings can be good. Or I know personally, like when it comes to my fitness, I'll go through these phases where me going to the gym and working out and stretching and eating well is the default where it's
Mhm.
hard for me to imagine not exercising. It's like, wow, I can't imagine not going to the gym and eating well. I would feel gross because that becomes my default. My inertia is to continue doing that. But then after a handful of times of not doing that, I lose that inertia. And then suddenly the inertia builds towards, I can work a little bit longer. I can go home, eat some snacks. And suddenly I have my status quo is a sedentary, yucky lifestyle. So allowing our defaults to orient us to actually making good decisions, even if our decisions seem like they're passive.
Yeah, and if you tend to fall into defaults, like I'm thinking specifically on 401k, it's like, okay, it was easier for me to contribute to my 401k because that was the default. I didn't have to do anything, even though, like you said, being passive is a decision in itself. But since I was auto enrolled, if I want to unenroll from that, now I have to be more active in my decision making, and most people, I would say, once that has started, they're not going to go in and unwind it because they tend to be passive to begin with, I would say.
Yeah, no, part of sort of related to this would be having anchors. So like anchoring your circumstance or your proclivities into something that's positive. You probably recognize this as well. This is not a beat up on anyone who's overweight, but generally people who are overweight, their friends are also overweight and their family's overweight because you're anchored to a that is normal. And therefore you go into that as a default. Where if your anchors are something else, uh, that could be a nudge. So again, there's a book called Nudge by Richard Thaler. I might be saying his name wrong, but that maybe you surround yourself with people who have a lifestyle or habits that are what you would like to emulate. And then those just that circumstance can start nudging you towards changing your habits. So yeah, allowing those small things to be your sort of default. I've had to do it for myself. Is hey, I don't I'm 35 years old, and it's easy to say, well, at 35, you're going to start putting on some pounds and feeling old and blah blah blah. Well, I have to remind myself, well, hey, if my anchor is a lazy 35-year-old who's quote unquote too busy to take care of myself because I've got a bunch of kids and things to do, that is my default. And suddenly my actions will allow that to dictate how I respond to situations. Versus a couple of years ago, Bobby and I were at the gym, and I was still getting after it. And Bobby kept saying, "Oh, Jim, we're getting old. It's going to be tough." And I told him one day, I said, "You know what, Bobby? Brad Pitt was 40 years old when he filmed Troy. So that was my anchor. My anchor was this nudge of like, hey, get after it. You're not too old. You can still get in great shape. So how you orient yourself and what you're anchoring your decisions on, allowing that to then nudge you in the direction, whether direction you want to go versus not. Again, sort of like, what is your status quo? Where are you going towards this?
Yeah, it reminds me of, like, if you're sad and having a bad day, and then you go turn on sad, depressing music, it's just gonna make it even worse. Versus if you just make the decision to listen to something happy or go watch a comedy and force yourself to laugh, like how much that can change you because you're removing that, or you're changing that default, uh, from I'm sad, I'm going to listen to something that is also sad, to no, I'm going to change this. I'm going to change my anchor here to something happy.
Yeah. Again, so as a Christian, there's a few things that I go back to regularly. There's a few verses in the Bible that are around this. It's like, this is the day the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. Or another one says, bless the
Mhm.
Lord, oh my soul, let all that's within me praise his holy name. This is the day the Lord's made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. That is not the default is I will. Like I, as an act of my will, I'm going to rejoice and be glad in it. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, all that's within me praise his holy name. That's a command. Like, hey, Jim, bless the Lord, oh my soul. Like, even if you feel downcast, even if you're frustrated, upset, you feel like you're a victim, no, this is the day the Lord's made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. So I'm making a decision. I'm commanding myself, do this. So yeah,
Yeah.
having like, are you going to allow yourself to be a victim? Or are you going to allow yourself to just passively go and like, oh, well, I'm sad. So therefore my decisions and my emotions and everything else will also fall in line with that. Like, no, don't do that.
Yeah. That's good.
Other things we could be doing, again, trying to help make better decisions. Consider opportunity cost. Again, going back earlier, just the impact of like even the thought of making decisions. If you're going to do status quo or if you're making a decision, I have to go left or right. Okay. Well, goodness, even on that, how much, if you're driving cross country, most of your trip is going to be a straight line. But where you end up is largely dictated by those little turns you make. A few years ago, that's probably like a decade ago or so, um, some friends and I, we were road tripping from Texas to Colorado, and it was like 10 degrees out and insanely icy. I mean, the whole way from,
Hmm.
yeah, all the way from Dallas up to Colorado, we were driving on a 2-lane highway, and the only way we could tell where the road was by the power line poles. The road was totally iced over. We were doing a controlled swerve for like 14 hours straight. It was sort of funny. You couldn't tell where the road ended because it just went into a ditch that was also covered in ice. And so we had my car, and then a buddy of mine was following behind, and we went straight. The road was 281 or 287, I can't remember, but you take it all the way from Dallas, Fort Worth, up to Denver, essentially. And there's like one turn. So my buddy Chris is following behind us, going 14 miles an hour in this controlled swerve for like hours. I would say 14 hours we were going. It was straight. And then Chris, it was amazing. At this one point of being bored, he decides that he would think it'd be funny to pass us up and be the leader. Well,
Hmm.
we're on a 2-lane road. When he decides to pass that point, he didn't realize it, but that was the one time there was a fork in the road. And I mean, we're talking going straight for 14 hours, and he goes around and he goes left at the fork, and we go right. It was incredible. The look on our face of what are the chances you make that decision at that point. So, where you end
Uh,
up is largely dependent upon how you make those decisions. And again, the decisions you make can be active, but sometimes they're passive. I think when on that with our buddy following behind us, we technically kept going straight. We didn't make a choice, quote unquote, make a choice. He made a choice that went off the road. He stayed on the road. Don't worry. He went to a different road. But the default was to keep going this direction. So just consider there are opportunity costs. I am making a decision. If I'm doing X, what will this impact? This is a really good question. I love this exercise, and I try to do this routinely when I remember. I need to start making a better habit. I want to say this is probably a Jim Collins idea, maybe not, but it's the start, stop, or stop, start, continue. Are you familiar with that?
I've heard it, but I don't recall the specifics.
Okay, so the questions are essentially, okay, what do I need to stop doing? AKA, what are we doing that's wasting time and energy?
Hmm.
Then what do I need to start doing? What should we start? What should we be doing that we're not doing right now? And then lastly, what do we continue? What's working that we should keep or amplify? And just
Hmm.
taking, you could do that for your business, for your work, for your school, for your family. Okay, as a family, during our time together as a summer, what should we stop? What are we doing that's wasting time? Oh, well, we are we're spending too much time watching TV, and that's not good for us because it's not leading to anything like building the closest as a family. Okay, what are we not doing? What should we be doing that we're not doing right now? Oh, well, we're not reading books together. And I think that'd be good for our family. What's working if we keep doing? Man, I love that we go on a vacation. Maybe we should do that for an extra 2 days in the summer. So again, taking inventory, and again, that's calling to mind the benefit of being intentional with decisions versus falling into the status quo bias. Like, all right, you're doing things right now. What are those?
Yeah.
Should you keep doing
Yeah.
them? Should you stop doing those things? What are things that I could substitute in or I should bring in as well? I think it's a fantastic exercise.
Yeah. It's a lot of value would come out of that. Again, so much of this comes down to like, I guess, knowing these different tools that exist to help with making decisions. But then once you're aware of these tools, actually taking the time to use them be so beneficial.
Yeah. Other little questions like this is more so with business. I guess you could apply it to life if you wanted to, but a question would be, what would my successor do? So, for instance, someone acquires my financial planning company, and they come in and they're able to make it wildly more successful. What did they do? So you're taking this outside view of, well, someone else who's stepped in and did it well. Why would they? So it's sort of like running a premortem. It's similar to taking an outside view. If this wasn't me, if someone else was doing that, what would I do with them? So maybe like, all right, Cade, you and Bethany and kids are our kids are great, and you're doing a great job. But if you stepped in and said, "Hey, what can I do to make this better?" and you're not Cade living the day to day of being the husband and dad and provider and all that stuff, but instead you're the outside person coming in, what would I do to optimize? So taking this outside point of view, what can you do to optimize this? What would you change and bring this outside perspective? I think it's a lot of our job. Like we have a lot of clients who are a lot smarter than we are, but it's just this it's taking this outside perspective on their circumstance.
Yeah, most of the time I feel like the outsider sees things that you don't see, whether it's you're intentionally not seeing them or things you just genuinely never thought about. Could be super valuable.
And some of these will be repetitive. So I mentioned earlier, like opening up the question. So instead of saying, do I do this or that? Hey, do I go to should we save for our kids' college in a 529? Yes or no? That's a fair question. But I would argue the better question is, should we save for our kids? And if so, in what capacity? What would I like for our kids to be able to do? Given all circumstances, what should they do? And then that opens up the thought like, well, I was assuming they would go to college. And I was asking, how do we save for their college? But instead, the question maybe is, do we want our kids to go to school? Or do we want them to have the ability to do something else? So you're opening the question up, which is then reframing. Even allows for more tools to come in. So over there, it's like, do I put money in a 529? Maybe you're asking, you're assuming they're going to go to college, and therefore should you save in a 529 or not? Well, even considering, we get asked that. I bet we're asked that question a few times a week. And usually when we take 3 steps back, most of our clients at least end up not even using a 529, or at least using a 529 in a way smaller capacity than they initially thought they would, because they realize once they reframe the question, they recognize that they actually were being too myopic on on college versus what they want. They don't want their kids to go to school per se. They want their kids to have options and opportunities. That's the better question. What opportunities do I want my kids to have? And how do I help them fund those opportunities? And you're asking, how do I fund a 529, which is a means of funding an option and opportunity? But the better question is, do I want to, what opportunities do I want them to help them have exposure to? Okay. So you're broadening it up, and that can bring in a lot more resources and tools.
Yeah, I think 529 is that's what you hear about so often is like I'm going to save for my kids so they don't have to have college debt one day. So 529 in a sense I would say is kind of the default. And so you have to take a step back and consider what else is out there and what am I really trying to accomplish? And maybe the 529 is the best fit for what you're trying to accomplish, but let's consider these other things and the opportunity costs.
Other, again, like we mentioned this earlier, is maybe make for a better default, thus allowing for inertia to work for you. So instead of your default being eating a bag of chips, your default is to eat carrots. Like my kids have never had a like regular candy bar. Like when they go to the fridge, like my kids regularly walk around the house with a carrot or celery, things like that. That is their default. Like maybe they'll
Mhm.
get an apple. That's their default. Now, of course, if we train them and allow them to, their default would become like chips and ice cream and stuff, and that's more of my default. That's because I've trained it. And what if we trained ourselves with a default to these, and then heck, we could prime ourselves to make better decisions. So my default could more easily become eating a carrot if I stocked my fridge with carrots and didn't have chips and ice cream, thus disallowing myself to make that decision. That's sort of like oh goodness, what's the book? It's with was it Ulysses, when he's about to sail across where the sirens are, the siren song, and hey, if you
Mhm.
hear the siren song, you can get drawn into the island and your boat's going to crash. Man, I should know this. So what Ulysses did, he wanted to hear the siren song, but didn't want to succumb to their temptation. So before it was available, he had his ship crew tie him to the mast. That way he could hear the siren song, but he couldn't succumb to it. So maybe that's what we need to do in our lives sometimes is like, man, I'm going to be really tempted to eat this ice cream. I'm going to be tempted to stop going to the gym. I'm going to be tempted to not save for my future. I'm going to be tempted for X, Y, and Z. Okay. How do I set myself up circumstantially before I'm in that situation where I will respond in the way that I want myself to when I am sober, when I'm sober minded? So
Yeah.
remember Ulysses and the siren song before it sings. Complex decisions. There are some decisions like, dude, you have 1,000 options here. Like I've been looking at, I know it's super early on, but I've been looking at what we want to do for our summer plans for this coming summer. And that's like,
Mhm.
I don't even know, 8 months out, 9 months out. But I'm
Yeah.
looking at, all right, I'd love to take my family to Colorado for an extended period of time. Okay, how many rental houses are in Colorado? So I can't just
Mhm.
that's overwhelming. So then I start considering, all right, how many bedrooms do I want to have? How many bathrooms do I want to have? How easy of access do I want it to be to hiking trails? Do I want it in town and out of town? So eliminating aspects to eliminate the amount of factors and decisions I have to make. So instead of deciding out of 10,000 options, I can say, I want a house that's at least 4 bed and 3 bath. Bam. Of the
Mhm.
10,000, now there's 2,000. That made my decision a lot easier. I want it to be near a town, but not in a busy town. Okay, now we're down to 1,500. I want it to be within walking distance to hiking trails. Okay, now we're at 500 houses. I would like it
Mhm.
to have a ping pong table. Now we have 300 houses. I just went from 10,000 to 300 houses. So
Yeah.
just eliminating aspects can also help make the decisions a little bit easier. So we're looking for shortcuts. Again, there are times that making
Mhm.
shortcuts are fine. It's just times we have to recognize when it's healthy to have shortcuts and when it's not healthy to have shortcuts. Is your
Mhm.
shortcut again eliminating houses so you can actually identify what's important to you? Are you taking inventory? Are you stopping and pausing? Hey, what do I value in this? I value time with family. I value spending time outside. I want a place to gather for our family and others to come. Okay, well, if I value others to be able to come here as well, I need more room than just my family. I need 4 bedrooms. And I want to make sure they're
Mhm.
comfortable. So I need 3 bathrooms. And I want to be outside because that's important for time with our family. So I'm allowing these values to influence the decisions. And I'm removing factors that don't fall in line with our values. If I said, you know what, summer is just another time I want to get through and make as much money as possible. I wouldn't take my kids on vacation. But I start off
Mhm.
with, well, spending time making memories and moments with my family is important. Bam, that's a value. Okay, if we're going to do that, how do I want that to look? Prolonged
Yeah. I.
good intense time with our family, with others to spend time making memories outdoors, minimal time in the car, minimal time with electronics. Okay, what does that look like? Then you start assessing, okay, well, what's the goal here? What decisions do I need to make? How do I make this decision easier without looking at 10,000 houses? So you're starting to eliminate options by,
Yeah.
I forgot who it was. A few years ago I was reading a book and it said that planning uh, man, something along the lines of like planning doesn't uh, eliminate your options. It makes you aware of the options that are important to you. I just totally butchered what that guy said, but it's not a way of confining. It's a way of identifying what's important to you and giving yourself more time and resources to allot towards what you actually value.
Yeah. It's essential to start with that. I'm the type of person that will, if I don't interject, I will try to overanalyze everything before making a decision. So if I don't narrow my decision down from 10,000 houses to 300 houses, then I'm probably just never going to make a decision because it's too much. So yeah, I have to
Thus,
go back
make
to, okay.
you just made a
Yeah,
decision to not go on vacation.
exactly. Yeah. So in order to avoid that decision, I have to go back to, okay, what are our values? What are we trying to get out of this so that I can narrow down what is the best option that will serve us in the way that I want or that we want. Um,
For more like quantifiable decisions, it's like, all right, you're going to start a business. What do you think the chances are that your business can do well? Oh, I think I've got a good chance of business working out. Those circumstances, try to answer with a percentage. So, okay, I have a 10% chance of being successful, but because of X, Y, and Z, I think I have a 40% chance of success. What would cause me? Okay, then we do a premortem. What would cause it to not work out? Boom, boom, boom. So again, try to give a more concrete answer through a percentage rather than just, oh, I do well or I don't do well. And then again, following that framework we described earlier with what's normal, what's your situation, run a premortem to allow hopefully to inch closer to your ideal versus just norms. A couple last things. This is really interesting. There's the book by Annie Duke that I was reading. She has a couple. There's one called Thinking in Bets. There's another one, How to. I think hers is How to Decide. She she made a really good point. I read one of her books a few years ago and it stuck with me. And it's essentially is she calls it resulting, and resulting is the impacts of decisions. Uh, and what she's getting at here is resulting using resulting as a means of assessing past decisions. So outcomes themselves don't necessarily indicate the quality of a decision that led to an outcome. So you need to look at the quality of a decision versus the quality of an outcome. And a very obvious thing here is you run a red light, Cade. Okay, you run the red
Mhm.
light, you make it through unscathed, and now you're 2 minutes earlier to where you were going to go. Was that a good decision? No, it was stupid. You shouldn't have done that, despite the outcome being good. That's things you have to, I want to teach my kids that. Oh, well, I did that and I
Mhm.
was just fine. Look, I threw that knife up in the air and I caught it and I didn't cut myself. Still a bad decision despite the good
Mhm.
outcome. So
Yeah.
understanding that can be sobering as well. Were you successful in that endeavor because of yourself? Again, that's wanting to ascribe this bias to like our own abilities versus considering the lack of considering outside factors. Was I successful? Was I maybe it didn't end up well? Was that because of me or something else? So considering the resulting, is resulting the equivalent of the decision. So don't confuse decision quality with outcome quality, but you do want to assess these in themselves and allow that you can learn. If you look at the decision quality and the outcome quality in their own, you can start learning about yourself and how to make better decisions. So I guess the biggest part after all of this, an hour and 15-minute conversation on making decisions. I'll end this with this. I know we always ask our two silly questions, or one decent question and one silly question. So my answer to the first good question is, hey, Cade, I'll ask myself, all right, Jim, if we had to end this on one closing thought, what would it be? My closing thought is
Mhm.
this: sometimes the hardest part of making a good decision is realizing that there's a decision to be made. So stop and recognize, okay, you're making a decision. Like Cade said earlier, I have 10,000 houses to choose from in Colorado. That's overwhelming. Therefore, I won't make a decision. No, you just decided not go on vacation with your family. That's what you decided. So there's a
Mhm.
decision to be made.
Mhm.
Stop and realize that, take inventory, and then make this decision intentionally. Cade,
Yeah,
what would be
that's
your
good.
closing thought after this outrageously long conversation
Mine,
on decisions?
I think my takeaway will be a tool that people should use, and the one that stood out the most to me was stop, start, continue. 'Cause I feel like that's something that can apply to a lot of areas, whether you're a business owner or just in your personal life with your family, whatever. Again, evaluating what things are not working that we should stop, what are we not doing but should begin doing. So that's what we're going to start, and what's working well that we need to continue. Stopping to evaluate those things, I think, would be really helpful for a lot of people.
All right, Cade, now we've got our silly questions. Do you have a silly question ready for the day?
Let me think here. If you could, started trying to make a list of just random things to ask you. I came up with a lot of would you rather's. Would you rather would you rather explore space, like go to the moon or something like that, or go to the depths of the oceans?
Honestly, neither of those are appealing at all. If I knew I was going to be totally safe in them,
Let's say that. You know you'll be safe because I'm the same way.
I guess space. Honestly, just like hiking in the Swiss Alps seems way more appealing than either of those,
Yeah,
even if I
that's
was
fair.
safe. But I guess
That's fair.
space would be neat, especially if I go to like deep space. That'd be pretty wild. There's a lot of things you could see. What
Mm-hmm.
about you?
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree. I think uh, experiencing zero gravity in space. I know you can experience that through different things here, but uh, zero gravity and just what it looks like. I think that'd be really cool.
If all right, if you had to drink one thing for the rest of your life, and it would fill all of your nourishment, so you don't have to worry about being water because hydration or whatever. If you could only drink one more thing for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Oh man, I think I alluded to this in a. You asked me something about coffee or something. I don't know. I'm very boring. Like I pretty much drink water and maybe some iced coffee or milk. If I had to get creative, I love a good chocolate shake, like a chocolate milkshake from Brahms. I very rarely drink a chocolate milkshake and don't come out of that even happier than I was before. So yeah, I would maybe chocolate shakes. Or when I make protein shakes, I'll make like chocolate, peanut butter, and banana. Those are amazing. So let me switch to that on the fly. A chocolate, banana, and peanut butter shake or of some kind.
When I was in college, we used to go to a Whataburger a lot late night.
Mm,
Like it's a classic Texas
mm-hmm,
college thing to do. And I would
mm-hmm,
always get Whataburger has these shakes that are giant. They think they're like 44 ounces or something huge,
mm-hmm.
too big, way more shake than anyone should be drinking. And I was frustrated because we would get our food and drinks and we'd go home to eat. But every time I get home, my 44-ounce chocolate shake was already gone. So I had to make a decision and be like I was like Ulysses, so I could not succumb to the siren song. But instead of tying my shake up or giving it to someone else to hold ransom until we got home, my my means of overcoming this problem was to buy two shakes. So I would buy two
Oh.
44-ounce chocolate shakes. I would have one for my car ride home, and there we are, the sirens waiting for me on the beach as I landed with a bellyache to come. So that was my that was my decision framework with that overcoming that issue.
That is one way to solve that. Absolutely. You can't go it's hard to go wrong with I think Whataburger fries are probably the best fries. Whataburger fries and a chocolate shake. Hmm.
I guess to answer the question, I would have to do coffee. Each coffee you can have hot coffee, you can do
Hmm.
iced lattes,
Hmm.
americanos, cold brew. I would definitely do coffee. Even having like uh, iced coffee after like running around getting sweaty, that sounds better than like you know like a glass of wine. It's like, dude, there's no way I'm drinking a glass of wine after I just ran around and like got a workout in. That would feel terrible. So I think I would go with coffee of different sorts. It's versatile and
That's
tasty.
yeah, that's a really good answer.
Speaking of coffee, it was good to chat. I can go drink some coffee now.
Okay. Yeah, enjoyed it.
Thanks, kid.
Yep.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Intentional Living podcast. Now, today's show is simply entertainment and educational in nature. Do not take this as tax, legal, or investment advice. If you are looking for tax, legal, or investment advice, you should go talk with a tax, legal, and/or investment advisor. But again, this content is simply educational and entertainment purposes. Thanks again for listening. We look forward to you joining us on the next episode.